The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Peter Sis, award-winning illustrator and animator, is in our studio today talking about his new book, 3 Golden Keys. He'll be interviewed by Margy Ligon, Executive Director of the Friends of the Minneapolis Public Library.
Peter Sis, it's an honor to be with you on the publication day of your most recent book for children, The 3 Golden Keys. I've been struck in looking at this book that although you have done a number of books for children, writing and illustrating them yourself and working with a number of other children's books authors, this one is much more personal in its tone. And I wondered why you had written such a personal book at this moment in your career.
Well, I've been doing all these books for children, but I really didn't have children of my own, so all of a sudden we had this wonderful, round, beautiful daughter, Madeleine, 10 years after I came to the United States, and I was looking at her. I thought I have to do something special for her because maybe she will never know where and why I came to this country from, and so there were many things, but she was the main reason to do 3 Golden Keys.
And it's a wonderful tribute to this child with a love letter at the beginning and dedication to her. And the book proceeds to deal a great deal with your own childhood, growing up in Prague, Czechoslovakia. Can you tell us, I understand you had a grandfather that lived in the American Midwest and influenced you as a child with his memories and with things that he brought back from America.
Well, my grandfather, Charles, was a railway engineer who got a contract to design railway stations in Chicago, Boston, and Cleveland. And he signed a contract which said that when he's done with his work, he would be returning to Czechoslovakia. He was a very truthful and honest man, so when he was done, he packed my mother, who was like 6 years old, and my uncle and his wife, and went back to Czechoslovakia. Everybody said, "Where are you going? Hitler is, gonna take over." There were all these ships coming to the United States full of refugees, but he was headstrong, so he returned, and his life was never happy since, because railway was obviously not in favor of either Hitler or Russians who came after that. But what was good for me was that would my mother have stayed here, I would probably look different. Maybe I wouldn't be doing children's books at all. And secondly, he brought with him lots of children's books from the United States, which he bought for his children. And he was collecting comic strips or funnies from the Sunday papers in Chicago. So he had this huge book, bounded copies of Orphan Annie, Katzenheimer Kids, Mutt and Jeff, and I was a little boy who was sort of flipping the pages in the book. Unfortunately, I loved that book so much that I sort of destroyed it because it was just newspaper print. And I think I didn't know about all this influence until I came here, and I've seen some of these strips still being in existence. I said, "Oh, I know this, I know that." So I'm sure it was like forming me when I did little drawings as a little boy, and then going through all these art schools in Prague and growing up in Prague. And thanks to my parents, I really had happy childhood. Even there was this terrible government in power, but I realized that children don't really know who's in, there's a dictator there or something. And so we played games, and I got assignments from my father about doing little books and little illustrations. And
so you were encouraged to draw as a child by your parents?
Well, I was supposedly, what my mother says now, I was even like getting up in the morning drawing myself. She didn't even have to encourage me. So I can see now with Madeleine, who's running around throwing things, that sometimes it helps if she would sit down and draw some more. She draws on the walls though, but
she draws on the walls.
Yeah.
And you did a certain amount of drawing on the walls when you were a child, it seems.
I did. I was so creative that I just like needed to express it somehow. So first I'm sure I did draw on the walls, and I did draw on everything, but eventually I did draw on the chairs, which we had old chairs. I did favorite chairs for my favorite people, so it was like favorite tennis player, favorite writer, favorite artist. That was interesting sometimes, because I remember once the chair wasn't quite dry and somebody came to visit, and then I could see my painting leaving, you know, in this three-dimensional sort of effect. I did do all these sort of light switches in the house, which was fun. I did paint everything I could. Now I think it was just because I wanted to be creative, and really I was living in the society which had one publishing house, one record company, one of everything, and there were so many wonderful creative people. So this was the way to express it, I guess.
And your father was a filmmaker.
My father was a filmmaker, which was great because he was constantly spinning some stories, and also he was a documentary filmmaker in the beginning, so he traveled a lot in the time when not many people did travel, and he was the first Czechoslovak ever to go to Tibet and speak to Dalai Lama. And he went to other countries and he would tell me stories about this country, so my fantasy was constantly enriched by his stories, and as I said, he would give me little assignments of what to draw and how to do it, and I think I'm grateful for it now.
And you did some film posters for some of his films.
Yeah, that was the only way how to get really some artwork shown, not just on the chairs or light switches. Then I did some posters for him. I also, since my whole family was in the film business, I also felt I have to myself be in the film business. So that's how I got to animation, and I did some. I studied animation, and I did 3 films in Prague and other films in Europe, and then in United. Actually, that's what brought me to United States.
Right. You became known because one of your films was shown at the Berlin Film Festival,
right.
And you then started traveling out of the country as a filmmaker. Is that right?
I was sold as a work for hire as a filmmaker. So I did series based on the children's book in Switzerland. I did another film called Players in England. So it was a ticket for me to get out of the country, which was really behind Iron Curtain. It was funny because the film really wasn't appreciated. The film which won in Berlin was first being really almost banned, but after it got award, they actually had an article in the paper about how much chance they give to the young filmmakers. And that brought me to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, which I thought was the center of filmmaking, not for animation though. But I came to work on the film for Olympic Games in 1984. So I came in 1982, so I would have enough time to make this film for the Olympic Games.
And then the USSR pulled out of the Olympic
And then the
Games.
USSR pulled out, and therefore all the Eastern European countries pulled out, and I got this cable like, come back, we have to talk. And I knew, because that happened before, that talk meant my passport would be taken away again. I would have to go through, I don't know what, because always when you came back, your passport would be taken away, then you had to apply for the new trip, and then it was really up to them to decide what film I will be doing in what country or something. So I said, no, I had enough of this. And I decided I'm not going back. Even I was trying to sort of asking for extension from them, but I didn't get it. So I was, at one point, like 2 months after the departure date, I realized that I'm on my own. And I notified my parents in some secret way. And I thought, okay, this is great, I'm in Hollywood now. I will do all these animated films. But all of a sudden, all the people who would invite me to these swimming pools and stuff, like, said, oh, you're staying here. So all of a sudden, I think they were afraid I would come and eat in their houses or something. So I had no friends. And I was in Los Angeles, so I thought, I have to find some, what should I do, illustration. So I thought I have to find some magazine or publishing house. Little I knew that there would be like almost none. So I was trying to get into some galleries, but they said my colors are not Californian enough, like in the sense of light blue and people on the roller skates, you know, looking happy. And I didn't know what to do, so a friend of mine who I met showing my paintings, she was the head of the gallery, she suggested I send one of my books to Maurice Sendak. So I sent one of my books I did in Europe to Maurice Sendak, and he called me collect. And he said if he would call everybody who writes to him, you know, like, it would cost him lots of money. He called me and said, what are you doing in California? I said, well, I haven't been to any other state. I don't know, there are like some better states over, you know. He said, how can you live in California? So I said, I have to get out of California, but of course I didn't see anything yet. But he was wonderful because he came to California for the ALA, and which I didn't know anything about what ALA is. And he called me and he said, if you come to the convention center, I will introduce you to the publishers. And he introduced me to the publishers. I realized that all publishers are saying, what are you doing in California? I realized publishing is not in California really. And I got my first assignment right away, which was a book for George Shannon called The Bean Boy. And I'm sorry, just coincidentally, the Bean Boy is, in the beginning of the book, he comes to the big city with skyscrapers. So I did picture of New York really before I got there.
Before you ever got there. You did have another break before you started publishing, and that was with your connections in film. And I don't know that people who know your children's books make the connection with the Amadeus film poster, which was an iconic image in the United States, and you did that film poster.
And it really is now connected with, I would say, with the Prague, because the colors and the sort of feeling I was trying to achieve was the same. And it was also a lucky break in the sense that I was supposed to come to the East Coast, but I was really penniless. So all of a sudden I get a phone call, and I was assigned to do poster for film Amadeus, created by Czech filmmaker Miloš Forman. I mean, he was American filmmaker by then, Miloš Forman, but it was all shot in Prague. It was shot in my family house. Actually, one of the scenes with the masks is shot in the house which I grew up with, and where I couldn't go back at that moment because I was just freshly sort of defected or immigrated or whatever, and so it was an interesting process. And they said, we will give you lots of money. Then they gave me even more money. Then I found out it's not really what I was supposed to get, but for me, being penniless, it was lots of money. It was possible for me to get to the East Coast, where I arrived, went to my publisher and said, here I am, because I thought the publisher would say, oh, this is our author, okay, we will find an apartment for you, we will take care of you. And they said, so here you are, so we hope to see you around. So there I was in New York, and with my first book coming out. And
but you had been fairly imaginative about how you could make money. Didn't you paint some eggs for a Swiss collector?
Oh, that was in the relay when I was down and out and didn't know what to do. Just after I really couldn't get any film made, and I realized that the only way to do it is to get in touch with this Swiss egg collector, who said, if you ever want to paint an egg for me, you can do that. So I thought this is the only way how to really make some money. And the trouble was that I couldn't really paint on the outside of the chicken eggs. They were too small, and every time I would get a phone call and I would squeeze my fingers, I usually broke them. So I had to get to Chinatown and get goose eggs and duck eggs, which were much bigger. The trouble with eggs is if you paint, you have to really hold them steady, and when you turn them, sometimes you smudge the side you already painted. So the whole process made me really hate eggs. However, they would like come back to me in my life, because I think my first assignment in New York, when I came for color illustration for the magazine, was an egg. So I thought maybe this is the last egg. Again, I was trying to get goose eggs. But then again, many years later, when I did a book about Columbus, there's a story about Columbus and eggs. Print magazine suggested I would paint an egg of Columbus with his sort of portrait for the magazine in New York. So I thought, here we go again, painted eggs. But that was again lucky break, because that actually brought my art to the attention of Mrs. Onassis, who was an editor in Doubleday, and who actually was really a person which came up with the idea for 3 Golden Keys and book about Prague.
Right, which is wonderful. Lucky for us that it happened. I just want to back up one step and ask you that when you finally were living in the United States, how did the reality of living here live up to dreams that you had as a child of the United States, coming from the stories of your grandfather and his experience in the comics?
Well, some things were better, some things were unexpected. What was better was like some things I couldn't believe. Like I wouldn't have believed that I would see, you know, it sounds like when the explorers went to some other islands, I would never dream I would see a basketball player who's 7 feet tall, or when somebody said you can eat hamburger with your fingers and let things sort of fall down and drip. Some things were bad, like when I was trying to get exhibition in Los Angeles and somebody would say go back to Belgium. I still don't know what that meant by that. I think what was interesting was reality in arts. When I remember with the Bean Boy, when they would tell me, don't make pointy noses, they are too European, just make noses more American. I think it took a little time to sort of adjust to things. There were some things which I wasn't supposed to draw, or some references which people didn't know what I'm talking about. But I think basically I was lucky that I was in Los Angeles when I decided not to go back, because the palm trees and sort of almost exotic sort of flavor, unreal flavor of the whole place helped me to, would I be in New York, I'm thinking sometimes, or some East Coast city, I would maybe get so afraid of the rain and darkness or something that I would say, no, I'm not doing this. But California helped, and I think I adjusted pretty much.
But New York certainly embraced you. You became quite a printed illustrator in the New York Times Book Review, for example. And I don't know that our viewers will make the connection between the work that they see in the Sunday New York Times with the children's illustrations that you've done. And I was struck by the idea that you had hidden messages in your work in Czechoslovakia, but then that you continued to do that in the United States. We don't think of ourselves as being very repressive about what people can and can't see.
I can't help it, but when you say that New York embraced me, I made New York embrace me, because I don't even know what happened to me, but I was so desperate, because I realized first time I was going back east from Los Angeles, really, and I thought, oh my God, I'm shifting back towards Prague, and so I came to New York, and I made sure I would be running around with my portfolio to the point that some people say now that they were really afraid of me, because I said, okay, you're saying you will have some assignment for me, but I want to make sure you will give it to me tomorrow. So that's what happened in New York Times. And the thing with the hiding things, really, I think I can't help it. It was just that whole growing up, and it was the only fun we had, and program as a student. So if I would find out that in New York Times I'm not supposed to show certain things, I would immediately try to sneak them in, because I just feel every time somebody says you shouldn't do that, I'm trying to do that. So there were some funny situations when I had to dress up people who were just in the swimming trunks, I think, and I had to dress the whole guy who was coming out of the closet on the he was surfing out of the closet. And there were many situations when some picture didn't run, because the reading of my illustration was completely different, but it was never dangerous or vicious in the way like the communist or totalitarian regime would do it. It's more like personal fun between me and the art directors.
And I'd like to suggest that our viewers really look at your drawings in your children's books very carefully, because that's the fun of them, that there are so many images, and it's such a rich read. You get a new image each time you're looking through the books. They're filled with these ghostly figures, particularly in The Three Golden Keys, the most recent book. But certainly you have a rich history of doing children's books, starting with The Bean Boy, but then working on award-winning books like The Whipping Boy.
Well, first, I think if I look at it back now, I mean, I started one thing which was not very good for me. I started with the stipple technique with like thousands of little dots which I would put in every picture, and that cost me almost every weekend when I had to do picture for New York Times, because it just takes too much time. But like Whipping Boy was very good for me, because even I did it in the time when they said, do you want to make some flat fee because you need to pay the rent? I did Whipping Boy, but of course because it was Newbery book, I think it helped my name to get any place, and I think it helped to get me color illustrations, because in the beginning I was just getting black and white pictures, and I think everybody was afraid that I wouldn't survive in New York or might run away or something, so I was getting like black and white pictures, and then slowly and surely I was getting one color, two colors, and then even my own book, because from the beginning I was trying to come up with my own story, but looking back now I can tell that it wasn't a very good idea to print it in. So I got a little better, and then everything was really starting to come together for me.
Great. And how did The Three Golden Keys come about? It's a very ambitious book.
It was a book I always wanted to do all my life, because it's about Prague, but I didn't dare to bring it up, because from the beginning when I said I would do something Czech or from Prague, people said it's really not that much of an interest. Do something about Paris, do something about Florence, do something about, some other place. And all of a sudden the situation was right. I mean, I had this beautiful little daughter which I wanted to leave something for, to explain how I came here. Mrs. Onassis, who got to know my work thought we should do something together. And in the same time, she went to Prague in 1989 after the Iron Curtain came down. And she said, why don't you do a book about Prague? And I said, like, oh, well, this is what I always wanted to do. So I did all these sketches of things I wanted to say. I wanted to tell 3 legends. I realized that I have this dream about going back to my childhood and sitting with my parents around the table and having, I don't know, Christmas dinner or Easter lunch or something. So I put all these things together and I did 65 sketches, which I thought she would cut down to 32 pages. That's what I was used to work with. And I didn't realize that she's got this carte blanche to do anything she wanted. So I showed her 65 sketches and she said, why don't we do that? Which was wonderful because all of a sudden it was like the most ambitious project of my life. I didn't realize it will be very strenuous because I spent like a year doing that with pictures on the walls around me, sitting in New York, really doing pictures from Prague and thinking about who was sitting next to me at school in 3rd grade and who I was trying to go out with. You know, it was like really heavy analysis of my life. But then again, I came home in the evening and I would see Madeleine. I said, okay, this is very good purpose to get it out of my system. I also realized that everybody who came from Prague, like everybody who came from Kansas or everybody who came from Caracas, would have different memory of the place because it depends what you lived through. I'm very happy that my sort of scary and sad memory of Prague doesn't exist anymore, that Prague is now a cheerful place full of, you know, jumping tourists or something.
When you go to Prague and you find your childhood home in the book, there are 3 locks on the door that are, and again, viewers should look very carefully, they're actually heart-shaped locks. So you have to find the keys to the heart of Prague for you, your family home. And the first one is given to you by a librarian. What did the experience of going to the library as a child mean to you?
Well, I thought this is explaining what I was lucky with, that like my father would open the whole world to me, telling me stories and reading me and bringing magazines and everything. I thought, what's the better image of like how you can find out about the world, how you can find out about life than library? Because I imagine that all these, let's say, people or strange mythical things coming out of the books are compilations of all the things which would be hidden in the books. So it was almost like the gate into the magic world, the library for me in the beginning. So I used to love it. My mother sent me recently some of the books I played with as a child. I don't understand how they got damaged a little bit, and somebody was drawing in them, obviously, and it was some pages with holes in it, but maybe some other child played with it after me, because I'm sure I couldn't have done that.
And the second key is given to you by another image that's drawn from art history. Well,
that's my obsession since the time. Actually, it's part of my film Hats from Berlin, and those are images of Archimboldo, who was painter in 16th, 17th century, and he was a painter of Rudolf II, who was emperor of Austria-Hungary, therefore Prague, who lived in Prague and who was very magic sort of emperor. And Archimboldo painted him made of vegetables and fruit, which I find sort of amazing with anybody who is like, you know, head of the country would be painted made of salads and radishes and stuff. So I like those images very much. I mean, he's also, Archimboldo did, of course, painting of librarian and other sort of paintings like that.
And you went back to Prague and did some photographs of Prague that you then reinterpreted in your book, not literally.
Yeah, at first I thought I would have to go. I went back through my life and tried to find the gardens we played with and tried to find the people I played with. Then I realized I should really do it from my memory. I cannot really do 27 windows. But I got inspired by the feelings, by the leaves, by the trees, by the clouds. So whatever was sort of emotional for me, I tried to get in, but I definitely, for somebody who would want to use my book as the, you know, guide to get through Prague, I wouldn't recommend it, because you might bump into the wall, because it's like what I remember and I don't remember very well. So it's a sort of very dreamlike book.
And there's a wonderful image in the book where you are crossing the Charles Bridge, and you as an adult are going back to retrace your childhood and to rediscover your Czech roots. And coming at you in an apparition is a small boy, also with a black cat.
Yeah, this was like sort of happened as sort of, I would say, like playing with, like saying, what would I have? Did I walk the other direction? Like when I was talking about coming back from Los Angeles. But what happened really was funny, that some psychoanalyst already called and said, you have to explain this to me, because I have like these statues with famous people who lived in Prague walking, and the text says it too, and it's Mozart, Tycho de Brahe, who was famous astronomer, and Kafka, who was really typical for Prague, being German Jewish but living in Prague and being sort of Czech. So I have these people, but it's just coincidence, because I thought, like, how many people walk on this bridge and how many people will be walking in the future, but I really didn't have any very heavy sort of ideas about how things are connected. But that happens very often with my pictures, that people read too much to them.
So what is next for you, Peter Sis?
Next, we just had a little baby, which is now 6 weeks old. So obviously, when they grow up with Madeleine, he will say, she has a book, I need a book, so I have to do a book for him.
Yes, you do. And what could possibly live up to the standard of this extraordinary book?
That's a good question. No, I think it's going to be book. It's going to be hard, though, after this book. So I think it might be a book about his mother and her side of the family, which either is Hungary or Minnesota, so I have to choose.
Well, we would put in a bid for Minnesota, because we would love to have you come back. Peter Sis, it's been an honor to talk to you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter Sis brings incredible detail, interest, and excitement to illustration in children's books. Thank you, Peter Sis. Thank you, Margy Ligon. And thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency.